The Desert Stones, A Journey of Family and Heart. Amina woke before dawn, as she often did, to the soft golden glow of the desert sun beginning to touch the edges of their small town. The cool morning air was already carrying hints of warmth, and the distant calls of birds echoed faintly over the dunes. In the quiet of her home, she could hear the low breathing of her younger brother, Sammy, still asleep in the next room, and the gentle rhythm of her father moving about, preparing for another day. Their home was modest, built of sun-baked bricks that had weathered countless summers and winters, and it stood quietly against the vast empty stretches of sand and stone that surrounded the town. It was a home filled with memories, some joyful, some heavy with unspoken struggles. Amina felt the weight of those struggles pressing gently, yet insistently, on her shoulders. Her father's health had been declining for years, the result of his time working as a miner, and her mother had passed when Amina was just a child. The responsibility of caring for her family had fallen on her in ways she had never imagined. Each day she balanced chores, small jobs to help pay the bills, and the quiet dream that one day her brother might study beyond the town, perhaps in the distant city where life seemed so full of opportunities. But for now, the desert held them in its wide, unchanging embrace. That morning, however, something unusual called to Amina's curiosity. She had been walking along the edge of the rocky dunes near their home, searching for small stones and artifacts she sometimes collected, when her eyes fell upon a cluster of stones unlike any she had seen before. They were smooth yet oddly heavy, their surfaces etched with faint patterns that seemed almost like writing, though she could not understand the shapes. The desert sand around them had shifted over time, partially burying them, as though the land itself wanted to keep them hidden. Amina crouched down and carefully lifted one into her hands. It was cool and surprisingly smooth, despite its weight. And for reasons she could not explain, her heart quickened. She held the stones close and examined them from every angle. There was something almost alive about them, something that seemed to whisper stories from long ago. Amina imagined her ancestors walking these same sands, leaving behind pieces of their lives, their struggles, their love. The thought filled her with a strange mix of wonder and longing. She wanted to understand where the stones had come from, whose hands had touched them before hers, and what secrets they might hold. The desire to uncover their story stirred something deep within her, a yearning that felt bigger than herself, bigger than the confines of her small desert town. When she returned home, the stones hidden carefully beneath her shawl, Amina's father noticed the unusual weight in her hands. "What have you found?" he asked, his voice gentle but curious. She hesitated, unsure how to explain.
Stones. I think they are very old, Baba."
I don't know. They feel important." Her father's eyes softened with a mixture of caution and intrigue. He had always respected her curiosity, though he often reminded her that the desert could be both kind and cruel, and sometimes seeking answers carried risks. "I want to take them to the city," Amina said finally, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. "There might be someone who can tell me their story, maybe a historian or a scholar, someone who understands the past." Her father sighed, a deep sound that carried years of care and worry. "Amina, the city is far and the road is not easy. You know the desert can be unforgiving, but—" He paused, seeing the determination in her eyes, the same spark he had once admired in his own youth.
"If your heart tells you this is important, then I will not stop you. Just promise me you will be careful."
The thought of leaving home filled Amina with a mix of excitement and dread. The desert, which had always been familiar, would suddenly feel vast and unknown. She thought of Sammy, still young and full of dreams, and she worried for him, even as she wanted him to grow up brave and capable. She thought of her father, whose hands bore the marks of years of hard work, whose eyes sometimes held silent sadness. Leaving them behind even for a short while felt like stepping away from the safety of the world itself. Yet she knew that to uncover the stone's story, she had to take this journey. Over the next few days, Amina prepared for her departure. She packed lightly, taking only what was necessary: a small satchel of clothes, water, bread, and a few personal items her family insisted she bring. She wrapped the stones carefully in cloth, treating them as though they were living beings rather than pieces of rock. Each night she would sit outside under the vast desert sky, tracing the patterns on the stones with her fingers and imagining the hands that had left them there. The stars seemed to shine brighter than ever, and she wondered if they were watching over her, guiding her path, whispering encouragement as the wind rustled through the dunes. When the day of departure arrived, the town seemed unusually quiet. Neighbors peeked from their doors, offering smiles, waves, and words of encouragement. Some whispered quietly about the journey ahead, warning of sandstorms and dangers, while others admired her courage. Amina hugged her father tightly, feeling the roughness of his hands against her cheek, the warmth of his heart pressing against her chest. "Be safe, my daughter," he whispered. "Carry our hearts with you always." Her eyes filled with tears, but she forced a smile, nodding. "I will, Baba. I promise." Sami appeared suddenly, bounding toward her with youthful energy that made her heart ache. "Amina, you must write, and bring me stories from the city," he said, his voice both excited and anxious. She ruffled his hair and laughed softly, a sound she hoped would reassure him. "I will, Sami, and I will come back with stories you won't believe." As Amina stepped onto the dusty road leading away from the town, the first rays of sunlight illuminated the dunes, making the sand sparkle like gold. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, a mix of beauty and challenge. With the stone secured carefully in her satchel and her heart full of hope and fear, she began to walk. Each step stirred the sand, leaving faint footprints that would soon be swallowed by the wind, a reminder of the fleeting nature of the journey and the persistence of life in this harsh, magnificent land. The first hours were filled with quiet contemplation. Amina noticed small details: the way the wind shaped the dunes, the distant silhouettes of mountain ridges, the occasional scurry of desert creatures. Everything seemed alive, vibrant with possibility. She thought about her family, their struggles, and the love that had carried them through so many difficult days. She understood, with a clarity that surprised her, that this journey was more than just a search for answers. It was a journey of the heart, a test of courage, and a chance to honor those who had come before her. As the sun climbed higher, the heat became more intense, but Amina pressed on, determined to keep moving. She paused only occasionally to rest, to drink water, and to examine the stones, feeling their silent strength. Each stone seemed to hum with energy, as if reminding her of the lives connected to them, the stories waiting to be told. And though the road ahead was long and uncertain, she felt a quiet confidence growing within her. She was not just a girl walking through the desert. She was a keeper of memories, a bearer of legacy, and a traveler in search of truth. By the time the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Amina had covered several miles. The desert, which had once seemed endless and intimidating, now felt a little more familiar. She set up a small camp for the night, careful to find a sheltered spot between rocks. As she sat by the small fire she had made, she gazed at the stones, reflecting on the day's journey. Though fatigue tugged at her limbs, her spirit felt renewed. The desert had tested her patience and resolve, but she had met each challenge with determination. Before sleep claimed her, Amina whispered a silent promise to the desert, to her family, and to the stones themselves. She would find the story, she would honor the past, and she would return. The night was quiet, save for the soft rustle of wind and the distant cry of an owl, and Amina drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep, feeling both the weight of responsibility and the lightness of hope. Her journey had just begun, but already the desert had started to teach her the lessons she would carry forever. Lessons of courage, love, and the unbreakable bonds of family. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert, casting long golden shadows across the dunes. Amina woke to the quiet whisper of the wind and the faint warmth of sunlight brushing her face. Last night's camp had been safe, but sleep had been restless. Her dreams had been filled with visions of the stones, glowing faintly in the moonlight, carrying the voices of her ancestors. Each dream left her with both wonder and a sense of responsibility. She carefully packed her few belongings and adjusted the cloth wrapping around the stones, making sure they were secure. Then, with a deep breath, she began walking once more, her feet sinking slightly into the soft sand with each step. The desert that morning seemed calm, almost serene. But Amina knew better. She had grown up listening to the stories of sandstorms that could appear without warning, of travelers lost forever in the endless dunes. She kept her eyes on the horizon, scanning for the first signs of trouble, and walked steadily, her pace measured. Her mind wandered as she moved, thinking of her father, her brother, and the quiet streets of their small town. She imagined their faces smiling at her, encouraging her silently. These thoughts gave her strength. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher in the sky, turning the sand into a shimmering sea of gold. The heat became more intense, and Amina began to feel its weight pressing down on her. Sweat dampened her hair and clothes, and her lips grew dry and cracked. She stopped under a lone acacia tree, grateful for its thin shade. The tree's twisted branches offered little comfort from the relentless sun, but even this small protection lifted her spirits. She drank water slowly from her flask, careful not to finish it too quickly. The desert could be unforgiving, and Amina knew she had to ration her supplies wisely. As she rested, she noticed movement in the distance. A figure appeared slowly, walking toward her across the sand. It was an elderly man, leaning heavily on a wooden staff, his skin weathered by the sun and wind. His eyes were sharp and bright, though lined with years of experience. Amina hesitated, unsure if she should approach, but the man raised a hand in greeting, his voice carrying clearly over the desert wind. "Peace be upon you, young traveler," he said. "It is not often I see someone walking these dunes alone."
Are you in need of guidance? Amina felt a mixture of relief and curiosity.
Yes, sir, she said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion in her legs.
"I am traveling to the city to learn about these stones I have found. I am carrying them safely, but the desert is difficult. I am not sure I am on the right path." The old man nodded slowly, studying her carefully. "The desert tests us in ways we do not always understand," he said, "but it also teaches patience, courage, and respect. I can guide you for a part of the journey if you wish. It is dangerous to walk alone." Grateful for the offer, Amina agreed, and together they continued along the dusty path. The man, who introduced himself as Hassan, shared stories of his own travels and the desert's many secrets. He spoke of hidden oases, of ancient trails marked by stones, and of travelers who had survived by observing the land carefully. Amina listened intently, feeling as though the desert itself was speaking to her through Hassan's words. She asked questions about the stones in her possession, but Hassan shook his head gently. "Some things reveal themselves in time," he said. "Patience is the key. You must be ready to listen to the desert, to watch and wait, and the answers will come." As they walked, the sun moved higher, and the heat pressed down more strongly. The sand seemed to shift beneath their feet, making each step more difficult than the last. Amina's legs ached, and her breath grew heavier, but she refused to stop for long. Every challenge she faced seemed to remind her of why she had begun this journey. Each step was a promise to her family, to herself, and to the unknown stories hidden in the stones. She learned to read the desert like a book, the direction of the wind, the patterns of the sand, and the way the sun reflected on distant rocks. It became clear that survival here required attention, skill, and courage. In the afternoon, they came across a small merchant caravan resting in the shade of a distant ridge. Colorful fabrics hung from the merchants' wagons, and the smell of fresh bread and spices drifted through the air. Amina approached cautiously, unsure if strangers would welcome her. But the merchant, a kind woman named Layla, smiled warmly. "You are far from home," she said. "Come, rest and eat. The desert is hard on travelers, especially those walking alone." Amina gratefully accepted, and she and Hassan sat with the caravan, sharing bread, dates, and water. As they ate, Layla shared stories of her own life, how she had traveled the desert for many years, trading goods and helping others along the way. She spoke of challenges, of storms that had destroyed her wagons, and of moments of kindness from strangers that had kept her going. Amina felt inspired by Layla's resilience. It reminded her that even in the harshest conditions, hope and generosity could survive. She realized that her journey was not only about the stones but also about connecting with people, learning from them, and carrying their wisdom forward. The next day, the desert seemed even more unforgiving. A sudden sandstorm rose without warning, blurring the horizon and whipping sand into their faces. Amina struggled to keep her footing, and her eyes watered from the stinging wind. Hassan guided her to a small rock formation where they could take shelter. Huddled behind the rocks, they waited as the storm roared around them. The sound was deafening, the wind relentless, but Amina felt a strange sense of calm. She touched the stones, feeling their smooth surfaces under her fingers, and imagined the generations that had survived in the same desert. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. After the storm passed, the desert appeared transformed. Dunes shifted, new tracks formed, and the air smelled fresher, as though the desert itself had been cleansed. Amina continued her journey, now more alert and aware of the desert's power. She learned to trust her instincts, to read the patterns of the sand and sky, and to move with both caution and confidence. Each day, the desert seemed to teach her something new, not just about survival, but about herself. Along the way, they encountered a lost child, no older than 8, wandering near a dried-up stream. The child looked frightened and exhausted, his small hands clutching a worn cloth bag. Amina approached slowly, kneeling to meet his eyes. "Are you lost?" she asked gently. The child nodded, tears running down his cheeks. With Hassan's guidance, they led him back to a small village nearby, where his family had been searching desperately for him. The gratitude in the parents' eyes moved Amina deeply. She realized that sometimes journeys were not only about personal goals, but also about helping others along the way. Acts of kindness, even small ones, could leave a lasting impact. As the days passed, the desert's challenges continued. Blistering sun, rocky paths, and the ever-present threat of sandstorms. Yet, with each challenge, Amina grew stronger, more confident, and more patient. She learned that the journey was not a race, but a series of lessons, each shaping her heart and mind. The stones remained safely wrapped in her satchel, and she felt increasingly connected to them, as though they were guiding her, encouraging her, and reminding her of the story she had yet to uncover. By the time the sun began to set on the 5th day of travel, painting the sky in deep orange and pink hues, Amina and Hassan reached a ridge overlooking the desert plains below. The view was breathtaking, waves of sand stretching as far as the eye could see, dotted with the occasional cluster of rocks or shrubs. The beauty of the desert took her breath away, and she felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had faced the desert's trials, met strangers who had become teachers and friends, and learned lessons she would carry forever. That evening, as they set up a small camp, Amina reflected on her journey so far. She realized that the desert had tested her body, mind, and spirit, but it had also revealed her own strength. She thought of her family, her father's gentle wisdom, her brother's eager dreams, and the ancestors whose stories seemed to live within the stones. Each challenge had brought her closer to understanding not only the desert, but also herself. Before sleep claimed her once again, Amina held the stones in her hands, feeling their weight and smoothness. She whispered a quiet promise. She would honor the journey, uncover the stories, and return to her family stronger and wiser. The desert, with all its trials, had become more than a place. It had become a teacher, a guide, and a mirror reflecting her courage, determination, and heart. And as she drifted into sleep under the star-filled sky, she knew that the next part of her journey would bring even greater discoveries, both about the stones and about the life she carried within her. The city appeared on the horizon like a mirage at first, shimmering under the heat of the midday sun. For Amina, who had grown up in the quiet, slow rhythms of her desert town, the sight of tall buildings, crowded streets, and endless movement was almost overwhelming. The air smelled different here, a mixture of bread baking, smoke from distant kitchens, and the faint tang of stone and metal. The desert behind her stretched endlessly, but in front of her lay a world of noise, color, and people, each with their own hurried stories. Walking through the city gates, Amina felt both excitement and nervousness. The streets were alive with merchants calling out prices, children running between carts, and men and women negotiating for goods in rapid voices. Horses and carts clattered on the stone roads, mingling with the shouts of sellers and the laughter of children. Amina clutched the stones tightly in her satchel, aware that in this crowded place she had to be careful. The stones were heavy, yes, but their true weight lay in the history and memories they carried, a weight she had promised to honor. Her first stop was a small library tucked between two taller buildings. The smell of old paper and polished wood greeted her as she entered. Dust motes floated lazily in the sunlight streaming through the windows. The librarian, an older woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, looked up from her work. "Can I help you, young lady?" she asked. Amina explained as best as she could about the stones, their strange markings, and her desire to learn about their history. The librarian's eyes widened slightly. "You may wish to speak with Master Rahim," she said. "He is a historian who studies the desert and its past. Many have come to him seeking answers." Amina thanked the librarian and set off to find Master Rahim. The city was confusing, filled with twisting alleys, bustling markets, and streets that all seemed to lead to different directions. Yet with each step, her determination grew. She asked for directions from passers-by, learning to speak politely and clearly, her voice strong even when her legs ached from walking. Finally, after hours of navigating the labyrinth of streets, she arrived at a modest house with a sign in flowing script, "Master Rahim, Historian of Desert Life and Traditions." Master Rahim, a tall man with a calm presence and silver-streaked hair, welcomed her into his study. Shelves lined every wall, filled with books, scrolls, and jars containing strange artifacts. Amina laid the stones gently on his desk, watching as he examined them carefully, turning them in his hands, tracing the faint markings with his fingers. His eyes lit up with interest.
"These are remarkable," he said softly. "They are not ordinary stones."
They are part of a family legacy, passed down through generations. Each mark, each groove tells a story of survival, love, and memory. Amina listened in awe as Master Rahim began to explain the origins of the stones. They had belonged to her ancestors, a family who had lived in the desert for many generations. The stones were used not only as markers for places and events, but also as a way to record lessons, stories, and guidance for future generations. Each symbol represented an experience, a moment of triumph, or a challenge overcome. "Your family valued resilience, courage, and love above all," Master Rahim said. "These stones are a testament to that. They carry the heart of your ancestors." As she studied the stones with him, Amina began to see patterns she had never noticed before. Some of the markings resembled scenes: a figure walking across dunes, a hand reaching out to another, the sun rising over distant hills. Each image told a story, a fragment of a life once lived, now preserved in stone. The historian showed her other similar stones collected from different families, but none seemed to carry the same personal connection. These stones were hers. They were more than objects. They were a bridge between past and present. During her time with Master Rahim, Amina also learned about the hardships her ancestors had faced. Droughts, sandstorms, and scarcity of resources had tested them repeatedly. Yet they had survived and thrived because of their unity and determination. Her heart swelled with both pride and a longing for her family back home. She realized that the struggles her father had endured, the sacrifices he had made, and the lessons he had silently taught her were not so different from those recorded in the stones. The desert had shaped every generation, teaching the same lessons over and over, and now it had guided her as well. Amina spent several days in the city, visiting archives, studying old manuscripts, and asking Master Rahim endless questions. She discovered that her family's history was full of stories of courage and compassion. One ancestor had saved a traveling merchant during a sandstorm, another had guided lost villagers to safety, and yet another had preserved a small library of stories for the community. Every story she uncovered deepened her connection to the stones and to the life that had led to her existence. Evenings in the city were quiet, despite the bustling streets. Amina would sit by the window in her small rented room, gazing at the distant desert beyond the city's edge. She imagined her father and brother, wondering how they were faring in the quiet town. She thought of the lessons the desert had already taught her and the stories she had learned from Master Rahim. She began to write them down, hoping to carry both knowledge and wisdom back home. Each story she wrote felt like a message to her family, a reminder that their hearts' struggles and courage were part of something greater than themselves. One afternoon, Master Rahim took Amina to a small museum that housed artifacts from the region's desert communities. There she saw tools, pottery, and writings that reflected the lives of people who had lived through similar hardships as her ancestors. She realized that the stones she carried were not just personal relics. They were part of a larger human story, a connection to a culture that valued resilience, wisdom, and unity. Seeing these artifacts alongside her stones made her understand that her journey was part of a much larger tapestry of life, woven through generations. During her stay, Amina also experienced moments of quiet reflection. She walked through city gardens, observing children playing, vendors selling food, and families gathering in courtyards. She saw similarities between the city's people and those in her desert town: the same laughter, the same care for one another, and the same quiet struggles. This understanding made her feel less like a stranger in the city and more like a traveler seeking her place in a long, ongoing story. She felt connected not only to her ancestors, but to all people who had learned to endure and love despite challenges. The most important discovery, however, came when Amina noticed that one particular marking on a stone resembled her father's handwriting. She had always thought it was a strange coincidence, but Master Rahim explained that certain symbols were passed down through generations and could indicate a personal signature or family mark. This revelation filled Amina with awe and deep emotional clarity. Her father, unknowingly, had preserved a piece of their family's legacy in the same way her ancestors had. The connection between past and present became tangible, and Amina understood fully why she had undertaken this journey. By the end of her time in the city, Amina had gathered as much knowledge as she could about the stones in her family's past. She felt a mixture of satisfaction and urgency, a longing to return home, to share what she had learned, and to reconnect her family with the rich legacy preserved in the stones. She packed them carefully once more, their weight now carrying both history and hope. Each stone seemed to hum quietly in her satchel, a gentle reminder that the journey was far from over, but that she was ready for what lay ahead. As she left the city, the streets seemed familiar in a way she had not expected. The lessons she had learned, the importance of patience, courage, and understanding, made every sound and sight feel meaningful. The bustling chaos that had initially overwhelmed her now appeared as a tapestry of life, full of stories waiting to be discovered. And as the desert appeared again in the distance, stretching endlessly beyond the city's edge, Amina felt a deep sense of connection, both to the land she had left and the family she was eager to see. Her heart was lighter, her mind sharper, and her spirit strengthened. The stones were no longer just objects of curiosity. They were reminders of who she was, where she came from, and the values that her family had carried through generations. With every step back toward the desert, Amina carried not only the physical weight of the stones, but also the wisdom, love, and courage of her ancestors. She understood that the journey was as much about discovering herself as it was about discovering the stones. And so, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the city walls, Amina took her first steps on the road back home. The city's sounds faded behind her, replaced by the whispering winds of the desert. She felt ready for whatever lay ahead, knowing that the journey would continue to teach her, challenge her, and guide her toward the most important discovery of all: the enduring power of family, heart, and memory. The desert greeted Amina like an old friend as she stepped onto the familiar sandy path leading toward her town. The wind carried the same dry, warm scent she had known all her life, and the sun painted the dunes in shades of gold and amber. After days in the city surrounded by noise, people, and endless activity, the quiet expanse of the desert felt like a comforting embrace. Every step brought her closer to home, closer to the family she had missed so deeply, and closer to the heart of her journey, the people who had inspired her from the beginning. Walking through the dunes, Amina felt the weight of the stones in her satchel, but it was no longer just the physical weight she carried. Each stone was now heavy with stories, with memories, and with the wisdom she had gathered in the city. She thought of Master Rahim, the historian who had carefully explained the significance of each marking, and of the countless hours she had spent studying the inscriptions. But more than that, she thought of her father, whose quiet sacrifices had given her the courage to undertake this journey, and her brother, whose dreams reminded her of the importance of family and hope. As she neared the outskirts of the town, familiar shapes appeared on the horizon, the wind-swept rooftops of their modest homes, the narrow paths winding between them, and the familiar clusters of palm trees swaying gently in the breeze.
Her heart leaped with a mixture of excitement and nervousness.
How would her family react to her return? Would they understand the importance of the journey she had undertaken? Would the stones and the stories within them mean as much to them as they did to her now?
Amina quickened her pace, and soon the town came fully into view.
Children played in the dusty streets, their laughter ringing out like bells, and neighbors tended small gardens and animals. The scene was peaceful yet lively, a reflection of the rhythm of life she had always known. Her father would be at work in the small courtyard behind their house, and her brother Sammy would likely be nearby, full of energy and curiosity. She felt a warm surge of longing to see them, to speak with them, and to share everything she had learned. As she approached the house, the door opened, and her father stepped out. His eyes widened in surprise, then softened as he recognized her. "Amina," he called, his voice a mix of joy and relief. She ran to him, dropping her satchel for a moment to embrace him tightly. The years of worry, of separation, of unspoken concerns, all seemed to melt away in that instant. Her father's rough hands rested gently on her shoulders, and he looked into her eyes as though seeing her fully for the first time in months.
"I have returned, Baba," Amina said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion.
"I have the stones and I have the stories. Everything you taught me, everything I have learned, I have brought it back home." Her father's eyes glistened with tears, and he nodded slowly. "You have grown so much, my daughter. The desert has tested you, and yet here you are, stronger than ever." Sammy ran forward then, his small feet kicking up dust.
"Amina!"
"You're back," he shouted, throwing his arms around her. "Tell me everything. Tell me about the city, about the stones, about Master Rahim."
Amina laughed softly, feeling her heart swell with love for her brother. "I will, Sammy," she promised. "But first let us sit together."
There is much to share, and it will take time. That evening the family gathered around the small fire in their courtyard, the desert sky above them darkening into deep indigo, sprinkled with stars. Amina carefully placed the stones in the center, arranging them so that each could see them clearly. She began to tell the stories, speaking slowly and deliberately, so that every detail could be understood. She spoke of her journey through the desert, of the people she had met, the lessons she had learned, and the city where the stones had revealed their history. Her father listened silently, sometimes nodding, sometimes closing his eyes as he absorbed the words. Sammy's eyes grew wide with wonder, and he leaned in eagerly to hear every part of the story. Amina explained the significance of each marking on the stones, the figures walking across dunes, the hands reaching out to others, the rising sun that represented hope and perseverance. She told them about their ancestors, the courage they had shown, and the acts of kindness that had been preserved in stone. She described the historian who had helped her, the artifacts she had seen, and the realization that their family was part of a long tradition of resilience and love. As she spoke, her father began to share his own memories. He spoke of his father who had worked tirelessly to provide for the family, and of the lessons he had learned from him. He spoke of hardship, of difficult seasons, and of the quiet moments of joy that had made life worthwhile. The stories intertwined with those Amina had uncovered, creating a tapestry of family history that spanned generations. Sammy listened in awe, absorbing not only the facts but the emotions, the strength, the care, and the determination that had carried their family through the years. Amina realized in that moment that the journey had been about more than the stones or the stories they held. It had been about connection, connecting with her ancestors, with her family, and with the values that had shaped them. She saw in her father's eyes the pride and love he had always felt, now magnified by the knowledge that she had undertaken this journey with courage and purpose. She saw in Sammy the spark of ambition and curiosity that would guide him in the future, and she understood fully that the stones were a bridge, linking past, present, and future in a way that nothing else could. The night grew deeper, and the desert around them became quiet. The only sounds the soft rustling of palm fronds and the distant call of an owl. Amina's father reached out, touching her hand gently.
You have brought our family history to life, Amina,
He said softly. Not only through the stones, but through your courage and heart, you have reminded us of who we are and where we come from. That is a gift beyond measure. Sammy, still wide-eyed with excitement, added eagerly, I want to learn everything, Amina.
I want to carry the stories too.
Amina smiled, ruffling his hair. You will, Sammy. We will all learn together. These stories belong to all of us, and we will honor them. Always. Over the next few days, Amina and her family worked together to organize the stones in their stories. They cleaned and arranged them in a small corner of their home, creating a space where they could reflect, remember, and share. Each day they would sit together, telling the stories aloud, adding memories from their own lives, and discussing the lessons the stones carried. The family grew closer than ever, their bond strengthened by the shared understanding of their history and the experiences that had shaped them. Amina noticed a change in her father as well. He seemed lighter, as though a burden he had carried for years had been eased by the knowledge that their family's legacy was safe in her hands. He laughed more freely, shared more stories, and encouraged Sammy to pursue his dreams with confidence. The stones, once silent and mysterious, now seemed to hum quietly with life, reflecting the joy and unity of the family. One evening, as the desert sky turned shades of deep purple and gold, Amina stepped outside alone for a moment. She looked up at the stars, feeling the vastness of the universe and the smallness of her worries. Yet within that smallness she felt power, the power of love, courage, and family. She held one of the stones in her hands, feeling the smoothness beneath her fingers, and whispered a quiet promise to continue honoring her family, to carry forward the lessons of the past, and to ensure that the heart of her ancestors lived on in the lives of those she loved. The desert around her was calm, the wind gentle and warm. Amina smiled, knowing that the journey had not ended but had entered a new phase, one of homecoming, understanding, and connection. She had faced challenges, discovered history, and learned about the strength within herself and her family. The stones had led her here, but it was her heart, her courage, and her love that had truly guided the way. And as she returned to her family, joining her father and Sammy by the fire once more, Amina felt a deep sense of peace. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had fulfilled its purpose. They were together again, stronger and wiser, and the stories of the past would continue to inspire the present and guide the future. The desert, the city, and the stones had all played their part, but the greatest gift was the reunion of hearts and the recognition of a family bound not just by blood, but by courage, love, and memory. The desert morning was calm, the sun rising slowly over the dunes, casting soft gold and amber light across the town. Amina woke with a deep sense of peace, feeling the rhythm of her home and family around her. The journey she had undertaken, long, challenging, and full of discovery, had reached its natural conclusion. Yet the lessons she had learned, the wisdom she had gathered, and the love she carried were not endings but beginnings. They were seeds, ready to grow in the hearts of her family, in the life of her town, and in the stories that would be passed down to future generations. She rose early, carrying one of the desert stones to the small corner of the house they had arranged for their family history. The smooth stone felt heavy yet comforting, like a heartbeat beneath her fingers. She traced the markings lightly, remembering the stories that Master Rahim had shared, the lessons hidden within each curve and line. Each mark was a testament to the courage, resilience, and love of the generations who had come before her. Amina smiled, realizing that the stones had guided her not just through the desert but through life itself, teaching her the value of patience, observation, and heart. The family gathered soon after breakfast, as they had done every morning since her return. Her father had a quiet pride in his eyes, a strength that seemed renewed after the long weeks of separation and anticipation. Sammy bounced in excitement, eager to explore the stories and stones, to imagine himself as a part of the long line of ancestors whose experiences had been captured and preserved. Together, they began to plan how to preserve the stones and their stories for the future, not just for themselves, but for the generations that would come after them. Amina suggested creating a small book of the stories with illustrations to accompany the markings on the stones. Her father agreed enthusiastically, and Sammy offered to help by drawing sketches of the symbols. Over the following days, the family worked together tirelessly, each contributing in their own way. Amina wrote, carefully describing each story and its meaning. Her father added personal memories and insights, connecting the past with their present. Sammy drew with wide-eyed determination, learning not only about his family history but also about patience and care. The process of preserving their family legacy became more than a task. It became a ritual, a daily act of connection and love. Each evening they would sit by the fire, sharing stories, asking questions, and reflecting on the lessons they had learned. Amina watched her father laugh more freely than she had seen in years, watched Sammy's imagination bloom as he connected past and present, and felt the deep satisfaction of knowing that their family bond had been strengthened. The stones, once silent witnesses of history, now seemed to hum with life, reflecting the unity, courage, and love of their family. One afternoon, a neighbor came by, curious about the activity. Amina invited them to see the stones and hear the stories. The neighbor listened intently, nodding and smiling as she explained each detail. Soon more neighbors joined, intrigued by the ancient artifacts and the lessons they held. Amina realized that her journey had not only enriched her own family, but had the potential to inspire the entire community. The desert had taught her the importance of sharing knowledge and wisdom, and now she could extend that gift to others. As the days passed, the family began to see changes in themselves and their town. Sammy became more focused on his studies, inspired by the courage and determination of their ancestors. He started helping other children in the town, sharing stories and encouraging them to dream big. Their father, once weighed down by worry and hard labor, seemed lighter, his spirit renewed by the knowledge that their family legacy was alive and cherished. Even the small town itself seemed to breathe a little easier, as the stories of courage and perseverance spread quietly among the people. Amina took time each day to walk in the desert, carrying a stone with her and reflecting on the journey. The sand dunes, once vast and intimidating, now felt familiar, almost like an extension of her own life. She noticed the way the wind shaped the sand, the soft colors at sunrise and sunset, and the quiet beauty of the desert night. Each element reminded her of the lesson she had learned: patience, resilience, and the importance of carrying one's heart in every action. The desert was no longer just a place of hardship. It had become a teacher, a guide, and a symbol of enduring strength. One evening, as the family sat under the starlit sky, Amina shared her reflections. "The stones have shown me that life is a journey," she said softly, "and that every challenge, every step, every moment carries meaning. We are all connected, not only to each other, but to those who came before us. And when we honor their stories, we honor ourselves." Her father nodded, his eyes glistening. "You have reminded us all of what truly matters," he said. "Family, courage, love, and memory. These are the treasures we carry, far beyond wealth or possessions." The family decided to place the stones in a special spot in their home, a place where they could be seen, touched, and remembered. They would care for them carefully, ensuring that future generations could also learn from them. Amina felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that the journey had come full circle. The stones had led her through the desert, into the city, and back home, not just to a physical place, but to a deeper understanding of life, family, and heart. As time passed, the lessons of the journey continued to unfold. Amina found herself more patient with challenges, more compassionate toward others, and more confident in her own abilities. Sammy grew into a thoughtful young man, curious about the world yet grounded in the wisdom of their family's past. Their father, proud of both children, felt content knowing that the family's legacy was secure, and that their hearts were strong. Together, they faced life's difficulties with courage, drawing strength from the stories and experiences preserved in the desert stones. One day, as Amina walked through the dunes with Sammy by her side, she noticed a small group of children playing near a familiar rock formation. She watched them laugh and run, their joy echoing across the sands. She felt a profound sense of hope, realizing that the lessons of the stones, the courage, kindness, and perseverance of her ancestors, would continue to ripple outward, touching lives beyond her family. She placed a stone carefully on a small mound, as if leaving a marker for those who might come after, and smiled. The desert, the stones, and the family were all connected, a circle of life that carried on quietly, powerfully, and beautifully. The years passed, and the family grew stronger together. They continued to share the stories of the desert stones with the town, teaching children, neighbors, and friends about the importance of history, courage, and love. The stones remained a tangible reminder of the journey, a journey that had started with curiosity, continued through trials, and ended with home, understanding, and renewal. Every glance at them reminded Amina of her courage, her family's strength, and the unbroken chain of hearts that had carried them through generations. And as the sun set each evening, painting the desert in brilliant oranges and purples, Amina felt a quiet gratitude. She had faced the unknown, embraced the lessons of the journey, and returned home with more than stories. She returned with wisdom, courage, and a heart full of love. The desert stones, once hidden and mysterious, now glowed in her memory as symbols of endurance, family, and the timeless power of the human heart. In the stillness of the desert night, under a sky filled with stars, Amina knew that her journey would continue, in small ways every day, in the laughter of her brother, in the gentle guidance of her father, and in the quiet strength of her own heart. The legacy of the stones lived on. Life would bring new challenges, joys, and lessons, but the foundation had been laid. The family was united, their hearts aligned with the courage and love of generations past, and the stones would forever remind them of the journey that had brought them together, strengthened them, and taught them the meaning of life, family, and heart. And so, the desert stood quietly around them, endless and timeless, a witness to the journey of a family who had discovered that love, courage, and memory are the true treasures of life. Amina, her father, and Sammy sat together under the stars, their hearts full, their spirits intertwined, and the stones resting safely among them. A promise that the lessons of the past would guide the future and that the journey of heart and family would continue, eternal and unbroken.